dinner will be served shortly. Thank you.
Thank you.
As soon as we finish it, you just keep it with you.
انا بعت له مايكل قلت له
ابعتوا لأنطونيو بليز قول له بس عشان يبعتوا لأكرم أسود.
هتعمل فيديو كله؟ يعني مش عايز اصور انا ولا تعمل؟
ايوه سوري في النيم
أنا من No, this is
حبيب حبيب حبيبي سيدنا الحمد لله على سلامتك. مبروك. الله يبارك فيك حبيبتي. ايام فرح مناصب وحاله. الحمد لله. يا بجد ميرسي على جايه. فاتح الصورة
الحمد لله على السلامة.
دلوقتي انا عايزه ان طالما مستوى 57 انا بعد الايمان هنعمل بيان عايزه 50. How are you?
I'm good, how are you?
رني على طلع عايزك رني على مينا، اديني موبايلك رن على مينا. ما تقدرش. مين معاه فاكره احنا؟ استنى مايكل، اديني موبايلك رن على مينا. بعتله شايف؟ طب معلش بس نتأكد.
All you do is up. Michael, you guys are the only ones standing up. جاي تسلم علي. اكيد ينفع كده يسلم. اكيد جاي تسلم علي. اكيد يا سيدي ما بعديش يا سيدي. انا ما بعرفش زي عيال يعني سماح يعني Who's organizing? Where's the mic? Is that the mic? They need to stand up. No, it should be working.
Oh, like I sent it to Michael. Tell him to send it to you.
Who wants it? I'll tell you. Should do anything.
He said he did send it to me. Michael, I need to send it now. It's funny there.
انت قاعد فين؟ ده كبار الزوار يا عم.
هي هنا في
وعامل
Miss you.
Hi everyone. I'd just like to welcome everyone this evening, and I'd like to introduce Mr. David Briggs, the Lord Lieutenant of Cheshire.
Your Excellencies, Your Graces, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is a huge privilege for me to be here this evening as Lord Lieutenant of Cheshire and to welcome, firstly to welcome all of you. Many of you have come a long way to be here this evening. And so a big Cheshire welcome to all of you, but in particular, of course, to welcome Dr. Naser Fouad into the role of Deputy Lieutenant of the County of Cheshire. The world of the lieutenancy is probably, for most of you, something you know little about. So I thought it would be helpful, and I hope interesting, if I spend a few minutes explaining the history of the roles of Lord Lieutenant and Deputy Lieutenant, and the responsibilities of those offices today, so that you can discover what Naser has agreed to do, or at least he can discover what he has agreed to do. So the story begins more than 500 years ago in Tudor times, when the first county lieutenants were appointed by King Henry VII. They were the king's representative, and they had to be local landowners. Now, I don't want you to think that I'm making a political statement, because as the Queen's representatives, we're allowed to do anything legal except party politics. But I think it is interesting to know that even 500 years ago, we in Britain were doing things differently than our continental neighbours in Europe. Because the European system of governing the provinces was always by the leader of the country sending out a governor from the centre. But that wasn't the way the Kings of England did it. The Kings of England used local magnates, big local landowners, and they became the King's representative. So these were people who were known and respected in the local area. So the first lieutenant in this part of the country was appointed, he was the 4th Earl of Derby. He was appointed by Henry VII with the title of King's Lieutenant to cover Lancashire, Cheshire, North Wales and Staffordshire. And there weren't any motorways in those days. An amazing, huge piece of territory. But this was the way that the king governed the country, by means of indirect rule, obviously without modern communications, so that the lieutenant was hugely powerful. And in particular, it was the lieutenants who controlled and recruited people for the militias, for the military. They, at various times in history, were the local defence forces, which existed as sometimes as military reserves, sometimes as police, and always as forces of national unity. So from the beginning, there was a connection with the military. In fact, the most important job of the lieutenant was to recruit soldiers for the king, usually to fight the French. For much of their history, the lieutenants have also acted as the Chief Magistrate, so the chief, the person in charge of the legal system. And they supervised the justices of the peace, which is the name we use in England for a magistrate. And the lay justices, just like the lieutenants, have never been paid for all that period of 500 years. They've always been volunteers. And they serve to maintain law and order. And it was through the justices that the lieutenants greatly influenced the political direction of their counties, steering their way, often with great difficulty, between local pressures and the demands of the king and of the national government. And they had, as I've said, enormous power. And although I have not been able to find the commission of Henry VII to the 4th Earl of Derby, I have found the commission of King Charles II to the 8th Earl of Derby in 1660. And this certainly made me, and it might make you, Naser, think twice about accepting this position. Because in 1660, Lord Derby's duties were set down in his commission as follows, and you'll be glad to hear this is a very shortened version. His commission: to levy, gather, and call together from time to time all our subjects of whatever estate, degree, or dignity, and to put and array, and put them in readiness, and every one of them after their abilities, degrees, or faculties, well and sufficiently weaponed. It's his job to make sure they all were weaponed, with power, wait for this, the power of the lieutenant, with power to slay, destroy, and put to execution of death, such and as many of them as you shall think fit, by your good discretion, must be put to death. I can't tell you how pleased I was to discover that the job description has changed a little in the intervening 350 years. So that's how they kept the peace. It was the job of the lieutenants to ensure that there were enough men to fight for the king, and they were properly armed, and this is why we have what still looks like a military uniform. Now, I don't have time, you'll be pleased to hear tonight, to talk about all my 29 predecessors. I'm the 30th Lord Lieutenant in Cheshire, but one interesting story as we're here this evening in Chester involves William Stanley, the 9th Earl of Derby. He was dismissed from the position of lieutenant by James II for failing to obey the king's instructions in assembling his militia in the face of the threat of invasion by William of Orange, who of course did invade the country and did become king. The Earl of Derby was later reinstated when he did summon his force, and he succeeded in preventing a regiment of the regular army under the Catholic Colonel Gage from taking Chester. So it's interesting that we have so many representatives here from the Coptic faith here tonight. There was already then, of course, the huge conflict in Britain between the Catholic Christians and the Protestant Christians. So after that, the new King William offered the Earl of Derby the lieutenancy of Lancashire, but not of Cheshire, which was awarded to his rival Lord Delaware. And he was so angry that he refused Lancashire. And in the 17th century, many county lieutenants were given another office, that of Custos Rotolorum, or Keeper of the Rolls, another judicial appointment. And the main responsibility was to recommend men to serve as magistrates. And this was hugely important because the right to be a magistrate was very important in those days to the local gentry, because they effectively became the local government, with the opportunity, I have to say, to benefit themselves and their family and friends. And so all lieutenants were, and remained really until quite recently, huge landowners. If we go fast forward to 1883, where the records show the county lieutenants dominated the British countryside. The Duke of Northumberland, the Lieutenant of Northumberland, owned 186,000 acres, and the Duke of Devonshire 139,000. And the average then for English lieutenants was an acreage of nearly 16,000 acres. Only 7 had less than 10,000. That compares with my 11. Not 11,000, one field. So in the early 20th century, of the 102 lieutenants, 82 had hereditary titles. They were all lords, and they had inherited that title from their father and grandfather and great-grandfather. Now there are 97 of us, covering England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland, and only 10 of them have hereditary titles. So I was, to say the least, extremely surprised with my one field when I was asked to become Lord Lieutenant of Cheshire. The job expires on your 75th birthday, and you will shortly discover when Naser's 75th birthday is, because it's written on his commission. But when my predecessor was 74 and a half, the head of the Honours Committee came up to Cheshire and interviewed about 35 people who were reasonably well known in the county, and I genuinely thought I was going to try and give him some help with some names. And I gave him the name of 6 or 7 people who owned big estates in Cheshire, and there are still people in Cheshire owning 5, 6, 10, and sometimes more, 1,000 acres in Cheshire. And he said, well, what about you? And I laughed. I said, don't be silly. I said, I own one field. And he explained that life has changed. And now land ownership is no longer the qualification. They're trying to find people who would make a contribution to the community and who would support local charities and other good services. In fact, do what the Queen would call serve the country. And I had, for 40 years, been involved in local charities, so I suppose I ticked that box. It was, however, nonetheless a great surprise when a letter arrived on my doorstep from the Prime Minister asking if he could give my name to the Queen as the next Lord Lieutenant of Cheshire. But let me go back to the history lesson. As I've said, much of the real authority of the lieutenants was lost during the 19th century and the first 2 decades of the 20th century. But until 1966, all lieutenants and all deputy lieutenants had to be military officers. So the service they had given was military service. The first Lady Lord Lieutenant was not appointed until 1975. And now there are almost as many Lady Lord Lieutenants as there are male Lord Lieutenants. And the lieutenants had, since their origination, all been referred to as Lord Lieutenants because they all were lords. They were all members of the House of Lords. It wasn't until 1972 that the Local Government Act recognised ceremonial counties like Cheshire, which of course now covers the area of 4 different local authorities, are all combined to form the ceremonial county of Cheshire. And that Act of Parliament made lieutenants officially Lord Lieutenants, even though, of course, and this is the sort of typical quirk of the British system, none of us are actually lords. It's difficult to get your head around. But there has been a recognition by all the most recent governments that today this ancient office must be seen to be relevant to today's society. And I just want briefly to tell you this evening how I have interpreted that very wide brief. But before I do, I just need to explain the job of Lord Lieutenant. Really, it can be divided into 2 parts. Firstly, a formal one, representing Her Majesty the Queen, which is largely ceremonial. And then, what frankly takes a lot more time, the community and voluntary role. The fundamental principle is that the Lord Lieutenant is Her Majesty's representative in his county. And it is his duty to uphold the dignity of the Crown. And indeed it is the responsibility of a Deputy Lieutenant to uphold the dignity of the Crown. And in this role I have wide discretion on how I carry out the task, but I'm expected to follow the example of the Queen by seeking to promote a good atmosphere and a spirit of cooperation. The Lord Lieutenants are expected to encourage voluntary service and to help benevolent organisations and to take a real interest in the business, industrial and social life of the county, and in particular all the voluntary activity that goes on in it. And in the United Kingdom there is an enormous amount of voluntary activity. Many, many people volunteer, give of their time for free to help those who are less fortunate. On the formal side, the most well-known part of the duty is to organise royal visits. So next week, the Prince of Wales is coming to Cheshire. He's really coming to Congleton, which is a small town on the other side of Cheshire, to celebrate the 700th anniversary of the making of the mayoralty. So there was first a mayor of Congleton in 1318. And the Prince of Wales is coming to celebrate the 700th anniversary of that in 2018. But running a royal visit, I can tell you, is quite something. I had previously been a businessman, and I thought I knew a bit about project management. But when I came to start organising royal visits, this is micro project management. Every moment, every minute is carefully pre-planned. But despite this, amazingly, things can and do go wrong. My predecessor, Sir William Rodney Davenport, loves to tell the story of when the Queen came to open a big new shopping centre just north of Cheshire, Cheshire Oaks. And you can imagine the scene, those of you who live in England will have seen this on television, when the Queen arrives, there is a convoy of motor cars led by a police car, and then some security people, and then he went 20 or 30 yards further on, so that he stopped outside McDonald's hamburger restaurant. And the Queen, who happened on this occasion, somewhat unfortunately to be wearing bright yellow, stepped out of her car under the golden arches of McDonald's. The resulting pictures were on the front pages of the world's press. And in fact, a couple of years ago, when it was the Queen's Diamond Anniversary, the Sunday Times published a picture for each of the years of the Queen's reign. And the one they chose for that year was that picture of the Queen in bright yellow underneath the golden arches. And another story which puts fear and trepidation into the hearts of every Lord Lieutenant and every Deputy Lieutenant who's responsible for a royal visit was when Her Majesty visited Lanarkshire in Scotland. Again, imagine the scene. The convoy arrives, and the job of the Lord Lieutenant is to get out of the car number 6 and run to get to the Queen's car so that he can introduce her to the line of dignitaries that are, of course, lined up ready. Now, the Queen knows it does take a moment for that to happen. So before she gets out of her car, she pauses. So she did. And she paused a bit more, and then she got out of her car and she looked up the line, and there was no Lord Lieutenant. So she walked up to the line of dignitaries and said, "My Lord Lieutenant seems to be indisposed, so I think I'll introduce myself. I'm the Queen." Poor Lord Clydesmuir, the Lord Lieutenant of Lanarkshire, had got his sword entangled in the car's upholstery and could not get out. And my other favourite story is when the Queen went to Dover. Dover, for some of you who know, is an important town on the south coast of England. It's the nearest town to France. So there have been many battles in and around Dover over the years. And the Queen was visiting Dover Castle and being escorted around Dover Castle by the Mayor of Dover. Now, although you've done all this detailed planning and you think you know exactly what's going to happen, you can't, of course, quite control where the Queen, and even more so where the Duke of Edinburgh, are going to walk, or what they're going to look at. So on this particular occasion, the Queen walked into the corner of the room where there were some magnificent mayoral robes in a glass case. She turned to the mayor and said, "Mr. Mayor, and when do you wear these robes?" To which the unfortunate Mayor of Dover replied, "Only on important occasions, ma'am." Apparently the Queen laughed all the way back to Windsor. So royal visits can be quite interesting. In fact, we have an interesting situation next week with the Prince of Wales, because there is a pub in Congleton called the Prince of Wales. So we are hoping that he will go and have a picture of the Prince of Wales with a pint of beer standing outside a pub with his own name. We'll see if it happens. But in addition to royal visits, I'm still involved with the armed forces in a number of ways. Sadly, I've had to attend a number of local funerals for soldiers killed in Afghanistan. And I've also had the privilege, a difficult privilege, but a privilege, of presenting the Elizabeth Cross to the next of kin of a number of deceased soldiers. Now, some of you may not know the system of English medals, but there are only 3 medals in Britain named after a sovereign. You may all know that the most important medal is the Victoria Cross, the ultimate medal for military people for gallantry. There is also a George Cross, a civilian medal for gallantry. And now Queen Elizabeth II has created the Elizabeth Cross. So this is very, very rare for a sovereign to name a medal. And what is interesting about British society today is that the Queen has decided that this medal is not for the dead soldier. It is given posthumously to the soldiers next of kin as a mark of respect for their suffering because their loved one died. So I've had to present a number of Elizabeth Crosses to very young widows. And you can imagine that is not the easiest occasion, a very emotional event. And indeed, writing the speech for that was quite a challenge. I was also, I had to retire on my 70th birthday, but I was honouring Colonel of the Cheshire Army Cadets, one of the best youth movements in the county. And I'm now involved in a huge range of charities, literally from the cradle to the grave. And for example, one of them is the Cheshire Childbirth Trust at the Countess of Chester Hospital. I know many of you in the room are doctors, and of course Naser has his own hospital based in the grounds of the Countess of Chester Hospital. One of the great charities there helps ladies and young babies, the Cheshire Childbirth Trust, and I'm their patron. And at the other end of life, I am involved with a number of hospices which help those who are terminally ill. I'm also involved in the honours process, and although I don't nominate people for honour, those Cheshire residents that are nominated for honour due to their service to the community do come to me for comments. And I use my deputy lieutenants a lot to help me to assess honours nominations. And I thought it was just worthwhile briefly, some of you probably aren't aware, but all of you who live in the United Kingdom can propose people for an honour. It's not difficult to do. You go to the Cheshire Lieutenancy website and you can download an honours form. And what is interesting is that the honours board are very interested to try to balance the honours amongst men and women, and also particularly amongst those from ethnic minorities. So women, the ethnic population of the United Kingdom, and those in the north of England don't get a fair share of honours. There are far too many males in the south of England. So if you know anybody, and surely some of you do, if you know anybody who lives in the north of England, who is female, who happens to come from an ethnic minority like Egypt, and you nominate them for an honour, you can't really go wrong. But joking apart, those people, and obviously Naser is a wonderful example of somebody from an ethnic minority who is doing more than his fair share to help those who are less fortunate in the United Kingdom, which is why he has this honour today. But there are many people who will have done lesser things than Naser, who still deserve to recognition and deserve a British Empire medal or to become a member of the British Empire. And please do that, and Naser, I hope, will help to make sure that some more people from ethnic minorities in Cheshire do get recognised and get a national honour for what they've done. And we've now got this relatively new medal that's been recreated, the British Empire Medal, for those that are in fact never going to get an MBE. So a very local service. It might be sometimes for very young people. Some teenagers have now got the British Empire Medal. There really are some opportunities for you to propose people. So I really hope you'll do that. And still on the duties of a Lord Lieutenant, I chair the Advisory Committee of the Justices of the Peace, so there's still a connection with the magistracy. So we're the people who appoint all new magistrates. And again, it is great to have people from ethnic minorities who want to serve their country by becoming Justices of the Peace. But those formal parts of the job take perhaps a quarter of my time. The part of the job which I guess I enjoy most and which hopefully will add some value to the county is the support which I try to give to the voluntary sector. And I've come to the view, after nearly 8 years in this role, that there is an enormous amount of untapped goodwill in our community in Britain. Most people really do want to do something to help others, but many of them don't quite know how to go about it, how to find something that they will be interested in. And of course, we live in a county and a country of extraordinary contrast between wealth and poverty. And I'll explain in a moment what I'm trying to do to help those in poverty. But those in Cheshire have a bit of a raw deal because there is a lot of wealth in Cheshire. So if you average Cheshire as a whole, we do not come out as one of the poorer counties. So if you're sitting in London, a lot of help from Westminster goes to Manchester and Liverpool on either side of us, where there is, of course, poverty as well. But there is a perception that everybody in Cheshire is a footballer and earns footballers' type wages, and of course that's not true. So we try to do what we can in the lieutenancy to help those who are in need. And we've done that in a number of ways. I've set up a thing called the Cheshire Community Foundation, which helps those with money and companies to give efficiently to good causes. And that was set up with the help of some of my deputy lieutenants. And it's interesting because I discover that most people have never been asked to give to Cheshire. And what I say is charity begins at home. Of course, please continue to help that orphanage in Uganda or indeed in Egypt. But charity begins at home, and please do think about those in need locally. And my motto is really the great American and Scottish philanthropist Andrew Carnegie, 100 years ago at the beginning of the 20th century, said, I'm going to stop the process of accumulation. He was an amazingly successful businessman, made a fortune. And I'm going to begin the infinitely more serious and difficult task of wise distribution. Giving money away well is actually quite hard. And the Cheshire Community Foundation helps people to do that. The money is put into a fund for the donor and secured for whatever he wants to use it for, but we do the due diligence to make sure it only goes to charities who are going to use the money well and not waste it on overheads and the like. I'm sure many of you will connect with that issue of how we ensure that money really makes a difference. I'm sure the problems are not dissimilar in Egypt. And what I'm trying to do is to be the bridge between the wealth of the county and the needs of the county. And so far, the Lieutenancy, not me, but the Lieutenancy as a whole, we've raised for this more than £10 million now. And we've recently started to build a fund. Some of you in the medical profession might be interested to know, but our view is that the biggest problem in England today is mental health. Sadly, a lot of young people are suffering from mental illness. And so the Cheshire Community Foundation is now starting a fund to help young people with early onset mental health problems. So that's been a success, and clearly you will understand why I was keen to get Naser to join the team, because he is so wonderful at that support that he gives to so many good causes. But charities need a lot more than money. And my second initiative, which is called Cheshire Connect, another charity, gets not people to give money, but people to give up their time and skill to help charities to become more efficient and more effective. We are a brokerage. I sometimes call us a marriage brokerage, and we make a marriage between a charity that needs skills and a business or professional person that has the necessary skills. So what we find is that many people want to give their time. But if you're an IT professional or a marketing professional, you don't want to dig out ladies' gardens. You want to use your serious skills to help charities, and that's what we make sure happens. Legal skills, accountancy skills, HR, business planning, all that sort of thing. We link people with skills with those who need the skills. And then I'm involved locally with the church. I am the chairman of the council at Chester Cathedral. I don't know how long you are able to stay with us, but tomorrow we have the Archbishop of York preaching at Evensong in Chester Cathedral, and we would all, of course, be very welcome there. But I am very passionate about trying to make sure that young people understand the importance of faith in their lives. And sadly, that is often missing from young people's education in England today. And another particular interesting role I took on about a year ago was that I now chair in West Cheshire the Poverty Truth Commission, an organisation, we're only the fourth one in the country, which does everything upside down. So instead of people who think they know how they can help the poor trying to tell them, we're listening to those in poverty, telling the story of how they are treated by the welfare state. And it has been something of a shock to somebody from a privileged background like mine to discover that the so-called safety net of the welfare state has big holes in it in the United Kingdom. And we are doing our best to patch some of those holes and to make sure that those people in need get a better service from the government. And we are fortunate in Cheshire that 3 weeks ago, one of the Cheshire Members of Parliament was made the Minister for the Department of Work and Pensions, which is the department that hands out all the benefits. So this morning I spent an hour with the Minister trying to explain to her what I had learnt from these people in poverty and trying to explain to her how the system could be improved. And that is the sort of privilege that I have as Lord Lieutenant, that I can get into the Minister's office for an hour or so. So it's a varied role. It's hugely rewarding, sometimes, of course, very frustrating. But I hope it's a rewarding one, and I hope it's one that Naser will enjoy. The role of Deputy Lieutenants, I should briefly explain. It's my job as Lord Lieutenant to find people in the county who've given appropriate service to the local community and who are willing to take on the role. As I've said, until about 50 years ago, 1966, appropriate service only meant military service. But since 1966, it has meant service to the community. So I am looking for people who are well known in the county and who give service through public life, through charitable activity, or through voluntary service. And Naser clearly qualifies on all of those criteria. I'm looking for people who have the ability to undertake public duties on my behalf. And I have every confidence that Naser will be able to do that hugely well. The tasks of a Deputy Lieutenant include representing me whenever asked to do so. And of course, whenever Naser does that, he will be acting as the Queen's representative. A Deputy Lieutenant is hugely valuable to me in acting as my eyes and ears throughout the county. I rely a lot on my deputies to keep me informed on all matters of significance happening across the county. And we are a county of more than 1 million people. So a Deputy Lieutenant also has the opportunity to recommend to me candidates for honour and even candidates who might get an invitation to a Buckingham Palace garden party. Before you all get too excited, I can only take one nomination from each deputy each year. But nonetheless, there may be an opportunity for some of you to go to a royal garden party. And Deputy Lieutenants can, of course, also bring to my attention organisations which merit a personal visit from a member of the royal family. And we have, I think it's 6 visits from the royal family to Cheshire in the next 4 months, starting next week with the Prince of Wales. And I will also on occasions be asking Naser to comment on somebody who's been nominated for an honour, a national honour like a British Empire Medal. I don't make the decision, Naser doesn't make the decision either, but what we say on the form makes a big difference to whether somebody gets an honour or not. And I also rely on my deputies to assess charities which are nominated for the Queen's Award for Voluntary Service. The best of British charities can win a fantastic award called the Queen's Award for Voluntary Service. And I will certainly be inviting Naser to officiate at citizenship ceremonies, another thing that all lieutenants do. So when anybody from a foreign country becomes a new national of the United Kingdom, he is welcomed into the country at a citizenship ceremony, and either the Lord Lieutenant or a Deputy Lieutenant welcomes those people to the nation on behalf of the Queen. Quite an honour. So I'm sorry I've taken so long, but I wanted you to get a feel for what this job is all about. My Deputy Lieutenants are here to help me to perform my duties in any and every way. And I am truly delighted to welcome Naser to this role. I much look forward to working with you, sir, and I am confident that you will enable the Lieutenancy to do even more to help the least fortunate people in the county. And if you would come up here, sir, it is now my great privilege to present you with your official commission.
Nice and happy. And again, same shot again for me. So look at me if you can, that's it. That's it, here we go. And again, same shot again for me. Let's do one this way. And again, quite smile. Last one coming up there, here we go. Thank you.